What Good Are You? It's a really great episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is the 12th episode of the 5th season. This is directed by Ken Levine, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. And it starts off with Debra choking. She's choking on some food, and Ray did nothing. He just thought she was having a cough, wasn't a big deal. Thankfully, she's okay, but she's upset that Ray didn't help her. And this really causes Ray some problems. He starts to doubt his own abilities, especially when Robert comes over, and of course he can do the Heimlich and he can save people. Obviously he's an officer, so he's trained, but nevertheless Ray is starting to feel like not a great husband, and he goes over to Marie's and Frank's, and I love this scene. It's absolutely brilliant. It starts off with Ray helping Marie open a jar and he does, and then she tells him that she just closed the jar, and he starts to ask Marie about whether or not he would be good in an emergency, whether she'd want him around in an emergency situation, and, well, she'd want Robert around first, which is a given, but then she said maybe Frank could be around first of all, and then maybe eventually Ray. And Frank comes down to breakfast, or breakfast? I'm not sure what meal they're having. He comes into the room anyway, and he ends up arm wrestling Ray, which is pretty funny. It's a nice scene. I really thoroughly enjoyed this scene. I thought it worked really, really well. We're then down at Nemo's. I think this scene went on a little bit longer than it could have done. I also am not a huge fan of Nemo's as an environment. It's just not a very satisfying set. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't think it's that appealing to look at. It's quite dimly lit, and it's just, obviously people are sitting down for most of it, so there's not a lot of movement. It's not a big deal, but it was longer than I wanted. And the guys were there making fun of Ray, and I actually like the fact that Ray did stand up for himself. He said, "I'm the only one sitting here who has a woman," which I thought was a really great moment and a great thing for Ray to say, because they're saying, oh, you're doing all of these things wrong as a husband and we'd all be better because of these reasons. But he's the only one who's married. He's the only one in a serious relationship, and I thought that was a really good moment for Ray. But he's still concerned about how he reacted, or I guess how he didn't react. And we're back in the house. Debra comes in with some groceries. Ray rushes to help her, even though she was right there putting them on the counter, and she can't find the ketchup, so he says he's going to go down and get more ketchup, but she finds it. Debra realises he's acting a bit peculiarly, and she ends up getting a splinter, so he rushes to get it out of her hand, and obviously she doesn't need his help to get a splinter out, but he is going to do this, and she ends up running around the house, and he's chasing after her and grabbing onto her, and she falls onto the floor off of the sofa, and it was funny. And then he dragged her across the floor, which doesn't sound funny, but it was great physical comedy, really great performance, really, really well done from both of them, and he ends up on top of her, and then he goes to get the splinter out of the wrong hand, and eventually Debra says all of the right things, that maybe she overreacted yesterday, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think she did overreact. I think Ray should have done something, paid her more attention, realised that she needed his help. But either way, in the moment, to diffuse the situation, she said the right things. And it was a nice way to calm things down. And then Ray did get the splinter out, and kind of made her hand bleed a little bit, which was not a pleasant sight. And then the final scene, I think, is so beautiful and serves such a great purpose. Obviously, there's some comedy there, as Ray is telling a story, and the story is clearly about the situation and Robert, and that's funny. But what we see is Ray telling his children a story. The children are loving it. They're absolutely loving it. And Debra's sitting nearby on a rocking chair. I think she was reading a magazine. And it's a lovely scene, and Ray is being a great father. And I think this was so significant, because after we see him being not a very helpful husband throughout the episode, we get to see him at the end actually being a great husband and father. And I think that was so important for us as viewers to be reminded that actually, yeah, he may not have been good in these situations, but he is in this moment. And I think that was really important, and a nice way to end things as well. So all things considered, I have no complaints. What Good Are You is a lovely episode, and as we see at the end, Ray is actually very good at some things. Maybe not everything, but certainly some things, and ultimately I thought it was a really enjoyable episode of Everybody Loves Raymond.